on your microphone. Ready to go?
We are
Is
good to
everybody
go.
ready? I'm going to hit the dice.
Yes, ma'am. Crank it up.
I'd like to call this meeting to order at 2 p.m. Today is Tuesday, April the 26th. Would you please call the roll?
Vice Mayor Shantz,
Yes.
Commissioner Hodges, Commissioner Lister,
Here.
Commissioner Poe,
Here.
Mayor Palladino.
Madam Clerk, if we can just have the minutes reflect that the mayor did call in and he is on a radio interview, city-related, for tourism, and that he would like to be excused for 20 to 30 minutes. So he will be attending today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Go on with presentation. Topics. Number 1, presentation on upcoming Pinellas Planning Council visioning sessions on beach access. Cookie Kennedy, Secretary, Commissioner of the Pinellas Planning Council, is with us. Hi, Cookie. Give us the latest of late.
Good afternoon.
I don't think that's on.
It's not on, but keep going and I'll get it turned on.
I put a 3-pack flyers in front of all of you so that you'll see them. And I don't think I know you, Terry.
You don't, Cookie.
Hi.
Come on, you've met me before. That's
I have met you before, but not as a commissioner, I don't think. Are you a new commissioner here?
This is my 10th year, Cookie.
Okay, and I'm, I focus medicine.
Okay, I'm
Just kidding.
I'm under the radar. It's
Okay, you're under the radar. Well, that's probably a good thing.
It is. It's a good thing.
A real good thing. We are going to be having our listening session for the Metropolitan Planning Organization here in your community on May 3rd from 9 to 11. And I'm going around to all the cities that I represent, and I would love for all of you to come and be with us and to give us some of your input on how you feel we should proceed as far as transportation on the beaches. As you can tell, we are having some issues, and beach transportation is one of our core ideas that we're going to be working on for the next 2 years. The second page the third page that I gave you on enhancing beach access, if you notice the objectives and the goals, these are some of the things that we're going to be looking at: improve access to the beaches, increase transportation options, try to create a safer environment. We're going to be talking about Vision Zero. Maybe some of you know about Vision Zero, but it was a program that was started in Sweden, and it basically eliminates fatalities as far as traffic violations and people getting hit by cars. So we're going to be looking at that. We're looking at bike share. St. Pete is in the process of starting that. And basically, this is going to be your opportunity to come before us and tell us some of your thoughts about your ideas on what you think that could help us in the next 2 years to have a smoother and seamless traffic flow on the beach communities. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. And I appreciate the opportunity to see all of you again. I do apologize.
No, it's okay, Cookie. It was a long time we met. It was in Western Coast League of
All
Cities
right.
meeting. It was actually when you got appointed to the MPO. Yeah. So you've been there about 6 years, haven't you? You've been there that long?
Well, the Pinellas Planning Council, I've been on for 6.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to tell you is we have a new name, and you're going to be hearing it. It's Forward Pinellas.
Good.
So we're kind of changing our name from the MPO PPC, and that'll be under the title. So it's going to be Forward Pinellas because that's our thought. I will tell you, as all of you know, we have a 13-person board. They're all elected officials. This is the best group of individuals I've ever worked with. We're all on the same page and very positive. In fact, we met in your community with Mayor Palladino about a week ago, talking about the beach ferry going up and down the beach and stopping in some different places and introducing the 2 ferry groups that we have in this area, and just seeing where we can go with that, you know, to try to eliminate some of the tourists and also the workers too. And I don't know about you, but I would be more than happy to ride on the ferry, go out to dinner, come down here instead of driving. So that's one of our thoughts. And like I said, if there's anything else I can do for you guys today, any questions? If not, I hope I see you on the 3rd. And even if you don't, if you just want to come and listen to some of the other people, we've invited as many of the business people that we can on the beaches. All of the elected officials have been invited. We've invited just residents. Some of the tourists that are here for 6 months will be here, and also workers. So we're trying to get a big group here, and I hope all of you will come.
Now, what'd you say the new name's gonna be of the planning?
Forward Pinellas.
Oh, Forward Pinellas.
Forward Pinellas.
I have one question on bike share. Is that company out of St. Pete, or is it a local company that we're trying to do bike share with, or is it St. Pete is?
Actually, the company
Pardon me?
that they're going to be using started in Tampa.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know how local you want to get, but they're local to Tampa.
That's fantastic.
And they came over.
Bicycles on the beach.
And it's, you know what, it's really interesting how the whole thing works. I mean, you can leave your bike, call them up. If you don't want to go to the next stop, they'll come and get it. It's really interesting how it's going to work. We're trying to get some of the hotels involved with it, too, and,
I know Key West has a big bike run.
yeah, yeah.
And when we were in Dublin, they have stations that you can take your bike and park them to, and then ride it anywhere in the city and leave it at their stations like that. So,
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have like these little stations, you'll put a credit card in. It's going to be really, you know, there are some exciting things that are going to be happening in the next 2 years. And I am thrilled that, you know, it's part of my journey right now, because we have a great Jim Kennedy, who is a commissioner in St. Pete. And he is basically anything that I ask him that I can do, anything that is involved with the beaches, he's very pro the beaches. And that's a good thing, because as you know, we've not had a representative before. The FDOT is working on all kinds of stuff. I kept needling them about, we needed in the congested areas where the bike lanes are to put some green. They have a green segment that they would put. And at first, they thought that the city should pay for it, but they came across the other day and they said, now this is only a draft. And they took the congested areas, and Whit Blanton, who's our executive director, and I looked at it, and I just looked at him and I said, who's paying for this? And they said, we found some money. And I said, are you serious? And so it's in the draft stage. We looked it all over. We found some other places. They're going back. And, you know, they like us, and that's a good thing, because sometimes when they don't like you, that's it. So I'm very happy with them, and I'm happy being your representative. You all can, you know where I'm at in Indian Rocks Beach if you need me for anything. And again, I hope I see you on the 3rd. That's okay?
Yes, absolutely, thank you. And actually, before she leaves, I think you were our first representative from the beach area
I am.
for that. And so I thank you for making this.
Well, I'm trying to be out of the
Highlight it.
box, because I don't want to get anybody to come after, you know, wants to, you know, my job. So I'm trying to do the right things here. But it's been a really, I knew I would like this job because I'm
You're good at
involved
it.
in planning.
Very good.
And our city manager, Greg Mims, has helped me a lot with it, because he was a planner by trade too. So between the two of us, we are really working it, and he's helped me a lot. So I'm thrilled with him. And also, our executive director did a lot of consulting work on the beaches. He was in Orlando in the private sector when we hired him. And so he is so well-versed, and you will meet him, and he will be running the listening session, and he's a worth of information, I'm telling you. I mean, you never lose your train of thought, or what you want to hear what he has to say. He's just awesome. So I'm excited for you to meet him too.
That should be a great meeting. Could I ask you one more question before you go? The Pinellas Trail, are they making connections to the beach, actually to the beach? Are we working on trying to get connections specifically to a
Well, there's
beach
the
area?
one from Treasure Island that is from St. Pete.
From
you know.
St. Pete
But,
down Central?
it-
Is that the, I don't know what.
Shane, are you
trail
aware
is.
of anything? Have you heard anything? That's not a bad question to bring up, that you would like to see something like that.
It's really close. I mean, you can
Absolutely.
almost see it, but
Yeah.
can't quite get to the beach.
No, those are the kinds of things that we need. Anything that would eliminate traffic in any way, shape, or form, whether it's bike riding, pedestrians, you know, residents who, you know, going back and forth, anything that we can do we're calling it seamless transportation. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Very nice to see everybody.
Commissioner, he's
Say hi
on
to
his way.
Jim.
Commissioner Kennedy, before you
I served with him
leave,
for 3
do
years.
you have any of the material electronically? We had, staff has been criticized about keeping this meeting a secret because of the developments happening in Madeira Beach, and so what I want to do is do my best to promote it and, get it on the doors, get it out on the sign outside. If you could get that to the city clerk. Okay, yeah, I'll take one too, just to take a look at it, but we'll get it out there as best we can. But from what I understand, I mean, it's fair to say this is in no way a reaction to the 2 proposed developments in Madeira Beach. This is from a very macro concept all the way up and down the beaches.
Never even been mentioned.
Okay,
This is what we're doing as far as the beaches go.
perfect. I appreciate it. Yeah, we'll get this material out on the website and we'll get a,
See you, Tom.
Thank you.
the other thing you didn't mention is what time is that meeting at? 9 to 11 and it's on. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Cookie. Next item on the agenda is presentation of the importance, benefits, and vulnerabilities of seagrass in reducing carbon footprint. Jim?
Jeff Biggins.
Jeff, oh my God. Can I have my glasses?
I've been called worse than that, Patty.
I know you, I should.
It's
know.
refreshing to be here not talking real estate today. Good. And this is something that's really cool. It's a passion of mine, and it has been. It's kind of my night, weekend passion hobby. So a long story I'll make real short is involved in a company, and we created different ways to fix seagrass habitats and create new seagrass meadows, because we all live on the water. We know from a marina standpoint, that's the juvenile fishery, fishes and all. I got in your package, you have a little rundown of a company. It's not a company, it's a foundation called Seagrass Grow. And it's not mine. I'm doing this on behalf of a friend of mine his name is Mark Spalding. He's the head of the Ocean Foundation, and it's out of DC. And together I helped him create this fund called Seagrass Grow. And what it's all about is fixing damaged seagrass habitat and creating new seagrass meadows. And so, and the reason why there was never any funding for such a purpose, everyone knows it should happen, but nobody ever wanted to pay for it. And so we created this and did a lot of research to figure out the true carbon sequestration value from a seagrass habitat. And then I was involved with the papers, writing the papers and all the scientific review. And the long story short is if you take an acre of the most pristine seagrass meadows, think like outside Eleanor Island, nice seagrass meadows there, and then you take an acre of the most pristine rainforest in the world, seagrass meadow will sequester or hold back from the atmosphere 35 times the amount of CO2, carbon dioxide, out of the atmosphere and greenhouse gases in the most pristine rainforest. So that was the idea on how we can create funding for creation of new seagrass habitats, because a couple of things they do, which most people didn't know and I didn't know, is of course carbon sequestration. Economic benefit for every dollar invested in a coastal restoration project, it brings in $15 in net economic benefit. A single acre of seagrass supports as many as 40,000 fish and 50 million small invertebrates like crabs, oysters, mussels. The safety benefits from seagrass meadows, they reduce flooding from storm surges and hurricanes. They actually soak up excess seawater, and they disrupt wave energy. So it's something to knock the energy out of the waves there. And we all know what it is. It's not just that annoying grass that we run aground onto every once in a while. It's a very important habitat aspect. So 70% of all the juvenile marine species that we are dependent on here all start in the seagrass habitats, and for seahorses, manatees, sea turtles, and shoreline erosion and protection. So from an ecosystem services, they supply 50% of the world's fisheries. It all comes from the seagrass habitats. And the rate of loss is tremendous. We're losing about 2 to 7% of all the seagrass every year. Every 20 minutes, the size of a soccer field is lost, and nobody's replacing it. So there's huge benefits. So here's our role, and here's my idea. I've been tasked in working with Mark Spalding at the Seagrass Grow campaign on making entities blue carbon neutral. You know, it's easy to become carbon neutral, and you can plant pine trees and do all those things, but nobody's ever thought about the sequestration through the ocean. And it's more effective and it's more cost effective. So one of the things I would like to see our city do is become the first blue carbon neutral city in the world. And it's a new movement. It's something that's fresh and new and exciting, like you guys have all made this city from a commissioner and standpoint. And it's something that I don't think will be very cost prohibitive to do. It's about $10 ballpark per ton, and I'm working with Doug to get that calculation done to see what it would actually cost. So basically, we would go through what is the carbon footprint of the city, the garbage trucks and the airfares and the trains and the hotel rooms and all the things that the actual impact that we have on the environment, so we can truly be a carbon neutral city, but not by sending money to plant a rainforest in Brazil. We can actually go right out here and fix our most important resources with the seagrass habitats. And there's also a lot of damaged areas from prop scoring that we can go out there and fix. And the money will go local. I'll make sure of that to go to a local project here. So I just think it would be kind of cool for our city to be the first one to be blue carbon neutral. And I just wanted to throw that out there and see if you guys have any questions or if it's something you'd like to pursue. And I'll do anything I can to help it go from here if you guys want to.
I wanted to make a statement about seagrass.
Sure.
You know, in this municipality, we have planted, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of seagrass. Debbie Laramie, our parks manager lady, I guess I'll call her, she's headed up groups of people to plant seagrass. And you know, the scouts, they're very interested in doing those sorts of things. Yeah. Not only the Boy Scouts, but also the Girl Scouts. So we could probably do a great thing with that, Jeff.
I think so. I think we can get some volunteers, we can get the kids involved. There's some local companies around here that actually make the bags that go into the props cars to bring the areas back up to grade, and really simple. And then so we can just restore damaged areas or just replant. It's more effective to fix the damaged areas. If you go, and I challenge you guys to do this later, go to Google Earth, Google Maps, and then go to Johns Pass and zoom in on those islands right there. And you'll see all the swirlies, and you'll see all the cuts and the prop scars and those seagrass meadows.
The grouper are laying.
What's that?
That's where the grouper are laying, in those dark holes.
Well, yeah, but they like to be in the grass. But
They love the grass.
they love the grass.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: the prop scars. When everyone runs aground because it's not marked very well, and they go over there, they run aground, they go, "Oh crap, I ran aground," and then they power off. And I know nobody in here has ever done that, but you've seen people who have. And so when you blow out, you leave a hole, and that hole never really recovers on itself, especially with high current energy areas like that. It creates a new channel. So those little scars actually keep eroding, and it can wipe out the whole meadow. So if you were to go on Google Earth, you know, you can do it the timeline, and you can look at the seagrass beds over time, and you're going to watch how they're disappearing and disappearing and disappearing and disappearing and disappearing right there. And that's, you know, I catch the grouper there too.
So they have a way to fix that.
Yeah, ways to fix that, and we can be the first town to really call attention to it, and probably get some pretty great media for being the first to do it, and kind of leading the cause to other people to join us. We can have blue carbon neutral other companies. I know we'll be a company that will join in from our Century 21 standpoint, and I think we kind of can start a little movement here and get some other cities to maybe follow your lead.
Now, where are we going to get the seagrass? Where does it come from?
The seagrass, we don't really necessarily need the seagrass. You just can, I think the simplest and most cost-effective project would be to go restore some of the damaged areas right around the island right now and kind of do a triage on them so they don't continue to erode, because the grasses will recolonize if you stop the holes. And that's, I've done many projects that way. Because if you do any other plantings, the success rate's really not that great for how many survive. So I want to do the highest bang for the buck so we can actually point back to it, and we can start watching the time lapse go the other way and our meadows expanding from what we did.
Jeff, does that also fix like the prop dredged areas where it's been prop dredged out? Will it help those areas where it's recovered, where sand's been blown on top of the existing seagrass?
Correct. Yeah, and if that's a big problem, Mayor, because if you do power off, you create that big hole, nothing fills that hole up, and they just start to get bigger. So a lot of times, if they power it off and you have a pile of berm next to it, you can actually suck off and put that hole back to where it was and cap it off with some sediment tubes and things just to kind of solidify the area. So I'll help design the projects with the Ocean Foundation if it's something we want to pursue. I don't think it's going to cost very much to offset the city's footprint, because it's not that big of a footprint. I think it's more of a gesture and kind of a stake in the ground to be the first to do something kind of cool, and that really benefits our local area and the tourisms, and every one of us depends on the seagrass. We like our water quality, we like our fish, and so that's that. What else? Any other questions on that?
No, just an observation. I know that we got a few dollars from the oil spill, money from BP. Did the foundation, the Ocean, the Ocean Foundation get any money?
Ocean Foundation is a global foundation, so they did not have any claims that they put in for the BP claim, but they have helped on some projects there. And I was, just for the record, I started a company called Seagrass Recovery and had the patents and the ways to actually fix all of these things. That's not why I'm here today. I'm here just to get the donations into the Seagrass Grow campaign. It's not me. It goes straight there to be a charitable contribution, if that means anything to the city. And it's not going to be me doing the work on there. I'll help make sure it gets done right because I care about it, but it's not going to my company. I'm not involved in running that company anymore. So I just want to make sure that's real clear, so there's no confusions down the road there. So
Very seldom do you get $15 back for every dollar that you invest, so that's pretty good. That's a good return on it.
it's a good return.
And I know that we got some of the BP money, so it's not earmarked for anything, but something that we could do here, I think it'd be a great idea.
Good idea.
If we could put something in the line item for next year, you know, for doing the seagrass and start that up. I think it's a fantastic idea.
I wanted to correct my statement. I was talking about, you're talking
COs.
about seagrass, and I was talking about CO.
The COs, yeah, we're talking about the seagrass.
Yeah, we actually did an Eagle Scout project over here at 9/11 for seagrass. It's a perpetual seagrass bed that the young man did. It perpetually grows seagrass. He can take it out, puts it right outside the seawall, and keeps those grass beds right outside the 9/11 park growing. The young man did a fantastic job.
That's nice. You can see the living marine world sitting right there every day.
It's amazing.
So if you guys like, I'll work with whoever I can work with here, and we kind of get a true number as far as what it would take to make the city blue carbon neutral. And then you guys can do with that number whatever you like and bring it up whenever it seems it's appropriate for you.
Just so the commission knows, you know, this is, we can get you the information. It is going to take some time. I thought it was going to be a little simpler than just running a report, but we're talking about the number of vehicles, we have the number of miles, we have the number of times people, you know, there's a lot of necessary data to become completely, you know, carbon free or whatever. So we'll certainly get on it. We can obviously use that tool that's on the website as a,
There's a carbon
as a
calculator.
budgeting tool. And we'll get on it. It's just so the commission understands, you know, it's not just something that we can whip out by the end of the week. It'll take some time.
And you want to do it right and count it ready, so if anybody ever challenges it, it's perfect. And
Yeah, I think the lion's share of it will fall on Mr. Marsicano's department and his staff, but we can definitely get those statistics.
great. And if you have any questions, you guys know where to find me, and happy to be here not talking about real estate, talking about something that I love. It's a passion, so I'd love to see us be the first blue carbon neutral town out there. So. Very good. Any other questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Beggins.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Jeff.
Do we need any, we have
I think he's
consensus to
coming
go ahead and move forward?
As long as you guys
Okay.
are in support of going ahead and moving ahead with it, like I said, it's a couple of months worth of work, but we can get to it and hopefully use the tool on the website to put some money in the budget for it. It'll be budgeted specifically.
What?
Is everybody agree?
Could I help? Could I volunteer to do the legwork, the paperwork? Do you want me to do it?
That'd be harder. It's just running a lot of reports, a lot of, I don't know, vehicle rosters and gallons of gas used and gallons of diesel fuel used. I mean, it's a priority. I think it's a neat program.
Right.
I think, you know, a lot of cities, much bigger and smaller than us, should take a look at it. So if we want to be the first one out of the gate, we've done that before. Let's do it. We'll put it on the agenda, but it's not a quick one, but we'll get to it.
Okay. And I apologize for being late. I actually had a chance to do a little promotion for the city over in Tampa with Ron Diaz on his radio station 620, so I apologize for being late. You can't do Tampa to St. Madeira Beach in 30 minutes. I just figured that out. Madam City Clerk, would you show for the record that I arrived at 2:20 p.m.? Thank you. And also, is there an extra copy of the agenda, because I do not have my computer with me?
I'll share mine with you.
Okay, thank you. I also want to thank Commissioner Kennedy. I've actually met with Commissioner Kennedy already on the Enhancing Beach Access, and I'm very proud that the City of Madeira Beach will be hosting that on May 3rd, and I cannot say what an outstanding job that Commissioner Kennedy is doing representing the City of Madeira Beach and the other beaching communities with the MPO and PPC. All right, moving on, presentation on budget and finance policies. Mr. City Manager.
I hand that off to Mr. Tenalia.
Thank you. As the City Commission is aware, it's been a priority of mine over the past year or so to develop a policy framework for specific budget and finance issues. The intention is that these policies will be helpful for guiding decision-making with respect to the budget, maybe framing trade-offs that need to be made in the context of long-term financial planning, and ultimately informing the decisions to be made by everyone up here on the dais. So today we'll be following up on last month's meeting when we went through the financial projections and got into that with quite a bit of detail, which I appreciate everyone's attention to that. The intent today is to introduce proposed policies. So these would be the third and fourth policies that the City Commission has considered. One of those is a revenue and rate setting policy. The other is a debt management policy. And both of those have been provided to you today. Of course, this is the first time you've seen them, so by no means are you expected to be an expert. But with that said, David Hart, our financial advisor from the PFM Group, is here, and he will walk you through those policies, and I am here to answer any questions you have along the way. So with that, I will introduce David Hart.
Good afternoon. How are you? Good to see you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Is there any preference on which policy we begin with? If not, let's just go ahead and begin with the revenue policy. As Vince alluded to, this is the first time you've seen them. It's also, then I think, fair to say it's the first time that Mr. Trask has seen them, and we are anticipating that the policies will receive a careful read, not only from you, but from your councils, and it would be our recommendation that the policies be posted for consideration by the citizenry. That's just a general comment we offer to our clients. With that said, the thought being, if I might start this out, is begin with the end in mind. What's being presented to you then is a proposal. If the commentary we receive back after legal review, your own review, and that of the citizenry does not require a substantive rewrite, we'll come back to you then with a policy then redlined, but it would be for your approval. In the event that we have gone too far or not far enough, and the revisions that are suggested by commentary that we would receive require a more substantive redrafting, then we would come back again with a policy more for your consideration to bring you up to speed on what the changes might be between now and then, if any. And in that instance, we would then have one more meeting before we would come back. So the point is, we're trying to have the right pace. We think, I hope pride doesn't go before the fall here. We think they're pretty good policies. We're hoping that they're not going to require the substantive redraft that my comments might suggest, but we do also want to be very attendant to the process and the deliberation that's going to come from those. The revenue policy, it does not possess any brackets, but I want to call out for you, just again sort of setting ground rules, the debt policy does, and I'll get to those in a moment. But the point being is the brackets are intentional. They're meant to be a place for discussion, which certainly I can participate with you now, or it could be part of a discussion that you have among yourselves or with city management. And with that stated, I'll jump in on the revenue policy. The lead-in phrasing, the policy statements, is fairly standard. Hopefully it follows with what we've done on prior drafts, as well as the two that you have in front of you at this juncture. It is also the case that this is a sort of a platform that you would operate from on a go-forward basis. And what it contemplates is that the city's existing revenue manual would on an annual basis be presented to you as part of your budget development process. And in theory, then, every revenue stream, be that from a tax rate, a fee, or a charge, has essentially a one-page template or more if required that speaks to the manner of the rates that are being set, the purpose for which they're being assessed, and that would be maintained and annually updated if necessary. As we go into the policy and get into the purpose and scope, and more specifically, Section 4, the execution of purpose and scope, it's contemplating then that the board, the commissioners, would respond to recommendations from city management as to any new or modification of an existing rate, fee, or charge. It outlines in some detail what might be contemplated by that activity, but it is very intentionally not prescriptive. It means to describe a process. It is clearly a policy, it is not a law, and it is trying to suggest for you a framework, a rubric by which you would assess that which is then before you, and help you in consideration of current as opposed to longer term implications. Might suggest that you be cognizant of if you're running some activity. I know in the last year when I've been here, you talked about parking fees and matters attendant to parking, and so it would suggest that you would be cognizant of what that means in terms of revenue production, certainly as it relates to parking fees, but also being mindful of what that might mean in terms of how many vehicle turns within a certain period of time, and what does that mean for adjoining businesses or access to beaches or what have you. So again, not meant to be prescriptive. It is meant to describe a process and to give you sort of prompts that as a community would enable you to feel like at the time a decision needs to be made. Thumbs up, thumbs down with regards to the then current proposal. You feel like you have the information in hand to make a determination. Happy to go through in more detail, but I do hope that the policy provides for you enough information that it is self-explanatory.
I do have some suggested changes to it. I'll provide that to Mr. Arden and Mr. Tenalia.
I just have one comment before we get off the subject of the revenue policy. David mentioned the revenue manual, and I just want to mention that is, I would suggest that that's not introducing a new development for the city. That was something that existed 6-7 years ago that kind of fell by the wayside over the years, and I'm suggesting that we start bringing that back. So in conjunction with the budget process, I would be presenting to you a summary of all of the city's revenue items, and for information purposes, you would be informed as to how we collect those revenues, maybe different analysis and forecasts that are associated with those, and I think would just provide more information that you could use in your decision making as we go forward. So I just want to mention that that's not it shouldn't be a foreign concept. In fact, Commissioner Lister, you mentioned you've been up there for 10 years, so I'm sure that it's something that you saw at some point. Again, I think it was done, stopped maybe 6 or 7 years ago, but I think it would be good information to share. So it's my intent that we'll include that in with the budget process this year.
Good idea.
Yeah, there were several things stopped 6 or 7 years ago, Vince. This was one of them.
If I might add a little bit more color, part of the impetus for this was when we engaged with the city to do the storm drainage transaction. And we being Vince and I, the original conversation was that the sort of an expectation that borrowing would be able to be solely supported by the revenues of the storm drainage system. When we got into the activity of conducting the borrowing, while the totality of city revenues is more than sufficient, that particular revenue stream was not sufficient to support the debt as a standalone, singularly dedicated revenue stream. The conversation that ensued between Vince and I was, long story short, was why not? And your revenue manual, 6 to 7 years old, had as a means of forecasting relying upon historical data. And that's fine. That's for some revenues, that's a good trend data. The challenge is that that trend data didn't support a future borrowing because it wasn't part of the past. And so this is sort of the opportunity, if you will, when you're making changes in fees, which had occurred prior to your borrowing, you had adjusted fees. It wasn't done with the consideration of what was the dollar cost of the project that was being contemplated, as well as what would be the interest expense associated with retiring that obligation if you chose to borrow funds as opposed to pay as you go. And part of the reason then why we're starting with the revenue policy is it does have then implications for debt, because the adequacy of a revenue stream has to be thought of in terms of not only current versus long-term, but operating as opposed to capital. And you as a Board of Commissioners then have choice as to whether or not you want to attempt to fund the ongoing capital expense on a pay-as-you-go basis, or whether it's in your best interest to consider borrowing. So with that said, I'll switch us to the debt policy unless there's any further commentary on the revenue policy. Debt management is an area that requires careful consideration by finance directors and those entrusted with the, shall we say, the stewardship of an entity's financial position. The ramifications of debt that is not well thought out can be very challenging for communities. Debt loads can be very challenging for communities in the best of circumstances. Point again here is not meant to be prescriptive. It's meant to be articulating a process that best protects for the current and long-term financial interests of the city of Madeira Beach. The policy statements and the purpose and scope are borrowed heavily from the prevailing practices of entities that we would point to as sort of establishing their respective North Stars. Government Finance Officers Association. With regards to the city's Bond and Disclosure Council, BMO, they would be members of the National Association of Bond Lawyers, and in fact, I believe Mr. Draper has had a senior position with that organization. The Florida Municipal Officers Manual speaks to matters of debt. We've made an effort to bring forward into your policy those best practices, as well as looking at cities like Largo and Venice and some of the surrounding communities, so that we can both give you comfort that you're not doing anything crazy, and that you're in both sort of a conformance with prevailing practice locally, as well as in a compliance, if you will, with that which might be thought to be a more national best practice. The debt policy in Section 3 speaks to long-term obligations, and so what we're attempting to do by way of this policy is distinguish operating from capital. So we're not talking about a lease that you might have for copiers per se, and we're also looking at things that have a lease life of greater than 12 months. So we're starting to say if it's a multi-year obligation, whatever form legally it might have, we want to have from a policy perspective, you can call it what you will kind of mentality, but if we're starting to get over bridging a fiscal year, we want you as a board to be able to have the deliberations with city management as to ensuring you're making the best decision given the facts as they exist at the time. In Section 4, then, with regards to the facts as they might exist at the time, we speak to what are debt issuance factors. These are the considerations that staff should be addressing. I use that term sort of perhaps too formally, but the thought being is that you should reasonably expect staff to bring forward information to you that addresses these circumstances as they are enumerated in Section 4 through item J. We further distinguish between whether it's a new money transaction, that is to say you're borrowing for that project, or whether you're refunding a certain circumstance, a certain obligation. In this regard, let me use as an example Section G in letter G within Section 4. And what you'll see here is the bracketed term of 3% and further bracketed within G $100,000. What that speaks to is we don't want to see entities churning refundings just for the benefit of investment bankers or what have you. And GFOA prescribes 3% as a threshold. If you can receive a 3% savings, it's their guidance that you give serious consideration. Again, it's a policy. It's not meant to say thou shalt do that in terms of automatically go forward, but it is to say that if you start to exceed 3% in terms of your savings, it would, in theory, suggest that it's worth your consideration. On the other hand, if the amount outstanding is minuscule, which is to say that, yeah, it's over 3%, but it's only going to save you $10,000, but in fees you're going to spend $100, you wouldn't do that. So, and my numbers are largely arbitrary to draw forward a point, and that is why you also see $100,000 listed. We want to say that there's a certain materiality that's involved. So if the refunding makes sense, it's sort of like your mortgage. You know, you are constantly receiving, I imagine, you know, you can do this, you can do that, call me now, and we'll save you hundreds of dollars a month. We're saying, let's make sure that's true. And let's make sure that if true on a percentage basis, it's true also on a dollar basis. Now, why are they bracketed? Because that's this is borrowed from the GFOA's guidance. Different communities sometimes have different thresholds. In all candor, I've never seen one go lower, but some entities go higher, 5%. Usually the size, the dollar size, is a real reflection of the size of the entity. But I would suggest, and this is why we put it in here, 3% on 100,000 strikes me as a reasonable threshold for you. And it's clearly the case that if you wanted to, as a policy, if you wanted to deviate from it, you're not violating any law, but I think it's an appropriate threshold. There are a couple of places in this document where there are brackets. I want to point out, I think it was back on, let me get there, in section 6 on page 4. There's a couple of things that we have bracketed here. One, these brackets, again, are meant to call forward the attention of your, in this instance, not only your general counsel, Mr. Trask, but also your bond counsel with Mr. Draper, and make sure that the language they find to be in your best interest. And as I'm looking at section 6, let's just, for sake of argument, go to A1, and this is speaking to general obligation indebtedness. To the best of my knowledge, Vince and I have chatted. We've done some research, if you will. There is not a Florida law that speaks to an amount that you see bracketed there at 3%. We've bracketed both the sentence and the dollar or the percentage because we want to make sure that that we've characterized it in context appropriately, as well as in the quantification of the percentage. 3% is a fairly standard valuation threshold for municipalities. Having this language, not only would we suggest as part of a prevailing practice, we would suggest that this would be something that a rating agency would want to know that you have in place and that you are adhering to those matters. Again, these brackets are meant for your consideration, and as you go down to number 3, one of the presumptions we're making by way of this policy is that absent a compelling argument to the contrary, you'd have 20-year debt. Now, that's an arbitrary number at some measure, but it's arbitrary only to a degree, meaning that in terms of prevailing practice, a 20-25-year type duration is a very commonplace. It's sort of meant to match up the useful life, what may be thought of the useful life of an asset for which general obligation indebtedness would be undertaken, against the repayment stream. So you're trying to marry up those two considerations, meaning you wouldn't borrow 20-year money to buy trash cans, and on the other hand, you wouldn't expect to pay off this building in 1 year. And so you're trying to strike the balance between the two. In section 6, we go on to elaborate on the form of debt and just distinguishing general obligation indebtedness from revenue bonds, lease financings, and then we get into section 7, where we speak to the debt structuring practices. It is in here that we will, in the balance of this document, we make some presumptions. We presume that the debt of the city will be done as a fixed rate, that you would not use variable rate transactions. We presume that you would not use derivatives. Both of those are stated as presumptions, It's certainly within your options, given this is a policy document, to in fact use variable rate debt and to utilize what might be thought of as a derivative to accomplish a financing. But the policy as a starting point would suggest, and that would be my recommendation to you, given the knowledge we have of your community, that having fixed rate as your baseline and not utilizing derivatives is the appropriate practice for you to adhere to. Again, in some respects, I don't mean this as a pride of authorship. Vince and I did work through this in some detail, but again, we'll be quick to point out that council has not had the opportunity to review it, and we respectfully are seeking their guidance on this matter, but hopefully also it is self-explanatory to both you and your constituents, and we welcome any comments at any time.
It's a lot to take in.
It is a lot to take in. We also, in terms of the debt management policy, one comment to make that I believe we made which you would see in the final. The GFOA, in terms of its practices, not only recommends that you have a policy, but the policy make reference to the selection of your finance team members. And that would speak to bond counsel, it would speak to underwriters in the event that you go that way. And I apologize, I should have made those references at the bottom of the last page as just sort of for future guidance. And that would be not to Commissioner Poe add to the lot to take in, but there is a lot to take in, and unfortunately there's still more to be considered. Want to really remind that the thought here is that you're tasking your finance director, assistant city manager, with the obligation to make sure that you're in a position to make an informed decision. It's not that you necessarily have to become experts, but that this policy would help you so that when the time comes for you to make a vote, you can refer to your policy and ensure that the materials that it speaks to, again, without being prescriptive, but contemplates that would be provided to you, that you have satisfaction that you've received those materials and the answers or questions that the policy suggests be addressed, that you feel you have the information requisite to make an informed judgment.
David, would you care to comment? The city manager, the finance director, the board of commissioners have been coined as spendthrifts, and we've become a more sophisticated organization. We've borrowed money for the first time in X amount of years. We've gotten a lot of projects and things done in the community that needed addressing years and years ago. I mean, the way that I see this, and again, I've got Vince, and this isn't my forte, but it seems as if we're laying the groundwork to almost not be irresponsible with our money, right? If the policies are set, we follow our policies. Those that say you're spending too much or you're borrowing too much or you're going to go broke tomorrow, that's impossible if we adhere to these policies. Is that fair to say?
Impossible.
Everything's possible. I understand that. But
I don't think I want to keep my job with PFM.
Understood.
Mr. Crawford, what I would say this is the policies establish a wonderful framework for decision-making to go forward. And I strongly believe that adherence to the policies will ensure that the decisions you make at that juncture are going to be the most informed decision that can be made. We can all go into the future and look back and say, well, if I'd only known that. But what this does contemplate is that you're other than a status quo community. And I think that's why Vince reached out to engage with PFM. You're dynamic. And what I understand about your community is that there had been as is true of many communities coming out of the Great Recession, some pent-up demand. And clearly investments operationally, whether that's in staffing numbers or pay, or whether that's from a capital perspective, a lot of folks deferred that. just because it didn't, even if they could afford it, it didn't seem like the right time. And many of them just, many communities just simply could not. You're in a unique position, and that's, I'll actually point to the revenue policy, Mr. Crawford, and in that regard, one of the activities that we speak to is in the third paragraph. And to your question, the policy, and I'm going to just read for that because I hope it's on point with addressing your issue. This policy must also give strong consideration to the local environment in which the city operates and its objectives and tolerances. Recognizing citizens, business, and tourists have a choice in where it is they elect to live, work, and recreate, this policy shall be administered in such a manner as to establish and maintain the city as a preferred location for residents, businesses, and visitors alike. And the point being, you're going to always have those constituents who spend more and some who will say spend nothing. What we're trying to do is give you a platform by which you can prudently make decisions, knowing that you're not going to please all folks all the time.
If I can just add to that, I think what we're trying to get at, and this is why Vince approached me about this, months ago when we wanted to go with you. It's, if you look at it as your home budget, the car needs repair, you need new carpeting, you need new flooring, you need new cabinets. We addressed all those things, sometimes even in the middle of the budget, but we never took the money to Las Vegas and gambled it away. Instead, we addressed issues as they arose. And now we're kind of back into let's get back into a normal format. We've caught up with the years past where we weren't exactly providing services or addressing projects or addressing problems, frankly. And now it's, I believe it's Commissioner Poe that said, we got to stick to the budget. You got to stick to the budget. And I concur with that, now it's put it in the budget. If it makes the budget, then we can go ahead and do that. But we have to address it under these guidelines. And so I appreciate the effort because it certainly addresses the idea that, Madeira Beach spent too much money or they borrowed too much money or they're, we're going broke and in 10 years we'll be filing for bankruptcy. So I appreciate the effort on this. I can see Tom scribbling away here, so I'm sure there's some legalese that we may want to change or address. But after I get a chance to talk to Tom and after we can sit down as a group, I'm sure we're right where we need to be.
If I might also add, these policies are, as Vince opened with, they should be viewed in totality. And the policies we started with last year, Mr. Crawford, as you recall, is the issue of fund balance and trying to make sure that the fund balance levels were appropriate for both your current considerations as well as the multi-year forecasting. And I think part of what Vince was leading the effort toward is trying to draw folks' attention to what might be the case in 3 to 5 years based upon assumptions. And they are assumptions because we're talking about the future, but trying to position then the city to make the most informed decision. And given that all said, and then given where rates were and where they were forecast to be, the investment policy then became part of the consideration because you don't want to be, so to speak, the community that's putting money under the mattress, particularly when it's tax money.
Or flying by the seat of our pants, and let's be frank,
Right.
What we were doing there for a minute, and it's a good regrouping tool to get back and say, okay, now if you want it, we got to address it, but it's got to be in the budget.
And I think you've, as a city, very quickly sort of found your own North Star, and these policies, if you might, are sort of helping to frame the direction that you would go and how it is you would proceed.
Everybody needs a budget.
Everybody needs a budget.
I keep my husband on a tight one.
My question is on the debt management policy, the debts that we have in place now, and it may be for Vince to answer, the debts that we have in place now that the city has, do they all fall within the parameters of this debt management policy?
Yeah, as a rule, they certainly do. There's the one caveat I would mention is that we included in the policy that as a rule, we would try to limit the debt to 20-year obligations. Well, of course, we went 30 years on this facility, but the language specifically says 20 years as a guiding practice. If circumstances arise that make sense to consider another number, that's what we'll do. So had this policy been in effect 3 years ago, that would not have stopped us from issuing the type of debt that we did. And nor do I think, or am I suggesting that we made a bad decision in doing that. These facilities are going to be here for 50, 60 years, who knows? So I guess I would just say that the debt that we've issued to date certainly would have fallen under the guidelines of this policy had it been in place. But the fact that we issued the debt and then proposed the policies, in my mind, is not, I mean, obviously you'd prefer to have the policy in place first, but the fact that we didn't doesn't mean that there's no reason to put it into place. So the city will certainly be in a position to consider more debt in the future. I'm not suggesting necessarily when that will be, but that'll certainly be a decision that needs to be made. And now you'll have a better framework in mind from which to make that decision.
Fantastic, thank you.
One last comment in terms of Commissioner's Ho's comment about the budget. My recollection from last time we were here is that the multi-year forecast did anticipate that there would be a borrowing at some point in those future years. That was partly then why we felt the need to sort of push now so that the policy as a document could be vetted ahead of any other discussions, and appreciating Mr. Crawford's comments about the sensitivity in the community. We wanted the policy well ahead of any of those types of activities so that the deliberations can ensue among you to the extent that that's what's necessary, without having the pressure of some financing hanging over you at the time.
I'd just like to say that when we went into this big bond issue to build this building, I don't think that we could have had any more intelligent people here who Vince brought in to talk to us about what we were doing, how we were going to go about doing it. He had his hand on it the whole way. Some cities aren't maybe as lucky as we are, but I've been through a bond issue before, years ago at this city, and I thought that Vince brought us more information as to what we were doing, how we were going to go about doing it, than I had seen in previous years. I don't think that he would move if he didn't have what he thought was the best he could bring in here to us for information. If we had any questions, what we were doing, and like you're telling us lots of stuff.
I appreciate that.
I mean, it was good. He brought, I can't remember their names, Vince, but they were all here in the front row, boy, talking to us. And it was wonderful. I mean, when I walked out of here, I felt like I had really been informed about what we were doing and I could go on the street to mention exactly what we were doing and how we were doing it. You know, because you always have people out there that want to know what you're doing. Are you kidding? You know, what are you doing? And Vince had it all on the line right here. I hope the other commissioners agree with me.
We do.
I didn't ever feel dumb when I walked out of here after all those times we had those guys here, and we could ask them questions or anything, so.
If I might bring this to a close by saying, I think part of, we certainly share the estimation of Vince's talents, but I'll also draw from your comments about before that transaction. And I'm picking up that there's a difference.
Oh, big difference.
And what we're about, if I might use the royal we in this context, is making sure that the type of presentation you associated with Vince, which is what allows him to address Commissioner Lister in the way to say that what was done since he's been here has been in a manner entirely consistent with this policy, is that it shouldn't be about who's sitting in Vince's seat, with all due respect. It should be a standard by which you can assume and your citizens can assume that that's the manner by which you're going to conduct yourself. And it's not left to an individual, it's your city's manner of conduct. So I think that's, we're just trying to make a little, without stopping short of law, it's a policy. Create that standard for you on a go-forward basis. Thank you.
We don't do this.
Thank you,
every
Mr.
year.
Hart.
Thank you.
And Madam Vice Mayor, just real quick, what was the bond issue the last time? It wasn't the beach groins originally. That was a special
No,
assessment.
the bond
wasn't
issue
it?
was for the marina years ago.
Okay. Because I was thinking the beach groins, but I think that was a special assessment they did on that. I don't know if you were here
On
at
what
the time.
thing?
The original beach groins.
No, that was done in the 50s.
Okay.
And that was done with funds from the city and the property owners.
Okay.
That's how that all took place.
Thanks. I knew you would have the history on it for me. Thank you. All right, next discussion on plan to address dumpster issues on Pelican Lane. Mr. Marsicano?
Yes, good afternoon. We wanted to talk about two things, I think, today. The dumpsters is one, and also the sidewalk on the other side of Pelican Lane. The sidewalk I'll address first. We're going to bring that forward in the 2017 budget for y'all to make a decision out on. Also, one of the things we discussed about Pelican Lane and and dressing up Pelican Lane and trying to clean up Pelican Lane was to enclose the dumpsters and to also do universal paving all the way across the back of all the buildings in Johns Pass. So it was straight across. We couldn't find anywhere in the code specifically that says that the dumpsters have to be enclosed. But the last time that we cited somebody and made them install a dumpster enclosure was in 2014. And that was the 7-Eleven on Gulf Boulevard in Boca Ciega. So that was the last time that we have done that. I think that that same code would follow to put the dumpsters into an enclosure to keep the trash from blowing around, because that's the issue. Then it just becomes an issue of policing the dumpster enclosures. Also, a lot of the businesses there use Progressive for their recycling, and the tops are not closed very often. There is a section of your code that states that the dumpsters have to be sealed. And we were down there this morning, and there was a series of cardboard boxes blown across, not the street, but across the back of the building. But I think if we follow by that code, or if it's going to be tough with the Progressive recycling, because they're picked up by an overhead dumpster. The enclosures aren't a problem. Our guys don't mind. They flip them open, they roll the dumpsters out. It's not a big deal. And then we stay after them to police the inside of their dumpster areas. The Progressive recycling, the boxes, that issue, we need to work with the Johns Pass Association, and we'll be at the next meeting that they have, I believe, the end of the month.
Coming up. I have been informed that they've increased their pickup schedule, so let's just say if they're getting picked up on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they might have another
Yes.
day or two now that they're getting picked up, so there's less sitting around of that material. I think what we need today is just for the board to understand that we're working with these people. Dave and I met with Johns Pass Village Association. The issue is this, we should probably have Tom review that code, Dave, if you do. You or Megan send that over to Tom. And then secondly, who's going to pay? The city, if we've got some skin in the game, I understand that, but I think we'll probably be, if we would say, okay, the city's just gonna take care of everything, I think we'd probably be constructing dumpster enclosures and paving private property. And so, we need to work with all those people out there and say, hey, this is how we dress this up, and everybody's gotta play nice in the sandbox. So they have to have some skin in the game too. It's not like the city's just gonna come on in and, score this one. Otherwise, every business in town's gonna be asking you for the most attractive dumpster enclosure.
Mr. Marsicano, I noticed, did y'all put bigger dumpsters down there? Has that been
Yes,
done?
we have
Because I'm just living and working back in that area, I've noticed it's a lot cleaner. And I know, and I always know, I see our guys down there, I see our sanitation guys working down there, they do a fantastic job. When they do dump the dumpsters, they police the area around there. They'll take time to go around the truck or around the dumpsters and pick everything up. So, hats off to what your guys are doing to try to help to keep everything clean. And Mr. City Manager, it started out great when we had the discussion on parking and trying to keep cars off the streets. I've kind of noticed everybody's starting to slide back in with the tail end of their cars, and that is pushing pedestrians in the middle of the road. So
Right,
we can kind of keep and I know that our community policing deputy's not here
We,
today.
we've got them down there, you know, it was an interesting conversation, we were in the old building, I think it was probably a previous commission where they said, let's put in a sidewalk to deter parking, and that's not necessarily a good reason, and I don't know, I might be changing my mind about that, but, you know, once we put in the sidewalk, then we still have to police the cars from parking on it, which they'll definitely do, because they've been doing it for years. So I think this is gonna probably take a month or two to, you know, meet with John's Pass, the business owners. I mean, let's face it, we know how this works in town. There might be 70% for it, and 30% of them are gonna say, no, you're not doing anything on my dumpster, and you're not paving my backyard, you know, and so we gotta make sure that everybody's on task. But in the meantime, I think, Dave, and I don't know if you have the statistics, but we went from 1 or 2 two-yard dumpsters to almost tripling their capacity, I believe. So not only have we tripled garbage capacity, they've upped their recycling bin, so there's just less junk, per se, laying around down there waiting for somebody to pick up.
With all that I said, it's, I think my report today is that it is better than it was. And we're working quickly to get to a place that I think everybody's gonna be happy.
And Mr. Barsicano, that's where I was going. It looks a lot better with them having a little bit more dumpster. And I want to thank Commissioner Lister. I know that he worked with the merchants down there and stuff to kind of getting that working. So thank you, Commissioner Lister.
Certainly, thank you. Dave, as I was walking the other day, you know the undergrounding of the utilities that were done back there. Each one of them has an underground green box above ground. So in line with each one of those underground utilities, that's a perfect place to put a double-sided fence and a dumpster on there, because they can't park there anyway from the road. So as you're going down Pelican Lane, if they would just simply put their dumpsters in line with that underground utility line, it would be case over, done deal. But that needs to be done. I know we paid somebody to clean up the John's Pass, you know, whether we contract it out or whether
We're there every day.
Yes, exactly.
Our guys.
So we need to have somebody go behind the buildings and just pick up. And we need to charge the John's Pass Merchants Association. I know Sonny's gonna be really happy with me about this. You know, that their extra policing has to be done. And then if they want to come back on their renters or their people that own those buildings, they can do that. But if they want this cleaned up, and they do want it cleaned up because it looks terrible back there, it really does, they're gonna have to pay for it. I don't think this should be on the city's back, but I do think that those underground green boxes for the utilities are the perfect place to put our dumpsters or their dumpsters if they're gonna do it. But again, I don't want the city to have to pay for it. I think they should reimburse the city for having somebody to come back there and police that area. You know, I know we're doing the road. Somebody comes down and all the way from Bamboo Beer Garden to Los's Pizza. But you know, Boardwalk Place doesn't have a lot of trash going up and down it. We all had dumpsters down there too. You know, Fisherman's Alley, there was a lot of dumpsters there. And so Pelican Lane is just, they throw the little balls out there. That's the styrofoam balls. That's what really bothers me. And that's what goes down in those drains, and that's dangerous. That just gets into the water system, and that's not good for us. So those pellets really need to be controlled.
And we're gonna talk to Progressive about making sure those dumpsters stay sealed, so you're not seeing those things blow down the road, the little foam things.
Just so everybody's aware of how we manage John's Pass, and it's no different than how we manage the City Center or the middle of Madera Beach. You know, I've been criticized on the internet that we don't have workers walking around with a 5-gallon bucket and the picker-upper or whatever you want to call it anymore, and that's just not good use of a $20 an hour employee. Our sanitation guys are down there, they do a fabulous job. If the businesses down there recycle, we use Progressive themselves, they do a good job. Debbie Laramie supervises a contract that watches all the landscaping and all the issues down there. So, you know, the constant criticism of, oh, we don't have any city presence down there anymore is not true. And you know, if we need to put some shell around a tree, give us a call and we'll put some shell around a tree. But just because it's not visible or as visible as it used to be doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's possible that it's maybe just happening a lot more efficiently.
Be there at 7 a.m. You'll see a lot of city employees there working.
You bet you're about $1. So it's just, you know, I don't want to get on my soapbox, and I've been beaten up a little lately, but I mean, to have Deb Laramie or any employee, frankly, walking around with a 5-gallon bucket picking up cigarette butts is not a good use of our time. We can contract that out and we can have 20 people down there doing it for an hour instead of doing it all day. So that's what you see. A lot of what you don't see is what's done in the early hours of the day.
And Shane, actually, there's residents of the city that take time and actually walk our beaches in the morning, and they see, you know, Kenny and them out there raking, but they're out picking up smaller things like cigarette butts. So volunteers also could be, if they want to complain, why don't you come help?
We do. I'm glad you brought that up, Dave. I don't know if we've got, one of our employees came up with some cutesy type sign that we put on all the beach walkovers that keep the cigarette butts off of the beaches. Our new beach rake does a good job, but I mean, you're still gonna obviously find some of those, but we did an active campaign internally. It was inspired by a resident who I think I had an email relationship for about 4 years with. I don't think I've ever even met the person in person. But it was a good idea. So if you, next time you walk over our beach walkovers, Dave, I don't know if they're up yet or not, but we have.
Yes, they are, in the can, not the sand.
Right.
That's it, in the can, not the sand, is what we came up with. So Megan Wepfer in Dave's office gets credit for that. But we are actively, even the smallest of things, we're still maintaining those things. But again, the criticism that it's not occurring, it's obviously occurring because it's, otherwise it would be pretty rough looking down there. So if anybody ever has any questions or how we manage that, feel free to go directly to Dave or to me.
Thank you. Is there any more, Dave?
So, Mr. Mayor, I think you'll probably see this revisited 30 or 60 days.
Well, and the paving part of it will be part of an à la carte type thing. Everybody knows that 133rd needs to be paved. There's several places that need to be paved. We're gonna have.
Parking lots being repaved in the new budget.
We're gonna have paving project underway in Boca Ciega neighborhood. So you'll have a basic price on all of these areas, and when we present you the 2017 budget, you can decide how you want to go forward.
Again, we just have to meet with the private property owners too that say,
Right.
sure, go ahead, put it on my lot, or don't touch my lot, and we're gonna have a lot of that, so I think we gotta get everybody down there. The other problem is that it's a very small percentage of the business owners that actually attend those Johns Pass Village Association meetings, so we really have to almost
Might be a little door-to-door.
Might have to do a little door-to-door campaigning to find out exactly, what they are or aren't interested in. The other part of it is a lot of them are absentee owners too, so it's tracking them down in Lebanon or wherever they might come from, but we'll get there. It's just another one that doesn't happen very, very quick.
At the end of the day, it's better than it was.
No, Dave,
I'll
I
take
agree
that.
with that. I worked on her, so it is better than it was. Thank you very much, and thank our sanitation people.
I'll make sure they know.
All right, next discussion on final closeout for the city center project with Hennessy Construction. Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Tenali is walking our consultant down. I think he's got a flight to catch. I tried to go back in time and look and see when we first started this project, but all you have to do is look at my hair or Dave's hair. I'm telling you, this was a project of the ages, and a lot of credit goes to Vince and to Dave and to the fire chief, and then Frank DeSantis came on board halfway through, and then man, any piece of drama that could happen could. They changed out their site superintendent, and the new site superintendent was fabulous, and then he passed away, and I mean it was a hectic construction. I did about 100 million up in Wisconsin, and this by far was the most complex just because of how things went about. But all that being said, and again, kudos to all those department heads, because without them, it couldn't have been done. The project came within budget, and when I say it came within budget, it came within budget, probably within a couple of $1,000s. And when you're looking at that size of a budget, to come in under is to be commended. To come in and think of the changes that we made. Hell, when we first started, we weren't even going to address the rec center. Then we put a band shell in, and we kept going and going. Then Rock Park came in, and the budget and the project evolved, and those were all good things. But to be able to keep that in line again goes to a lot of credence. Vince is great at saying no, and he needs to do that. The department heads were fabulous in kind of adopting their own buildings and making sure that the issues were being taken care of. But we literally just did the last host of fixes last week. So, I mean, that was about 3 years of our life above and beyond doing our normal jobs. And I don't need any credit, but my department heads certainly do. So when you see them, give them a pat on the back. We got Doug, too, that we adopted and hired halfway through it because we knew we were going to increase our rec department services based on the facilities that we had. So he quick got immersed in building construction and knew that a mushroom growing in the corner of his conference room was a bad thing, but those are the types of things that we dealt with on a day-to-day basis. So long way of saying your staff did a good job and brought it in within budget.
And Mr. Crawford, in my previous life being in construction, a project manager, and working on stuff with FAA, Corps of Engineers, FDOT, different municipalities. I've never heard that one before,
It's not
okay?
easy.
That's the new one, so congratulations and thank you to our staff.
Yeah,
outstanding job.
if you see them individually, give them a pat on the back, because I don't get a chance to do it very often, and they really did. You know, these guys all have a job to do. They dedicated hours and hours and weekends and nights to meetings, and it seemed like we were never gonna get there, and then boom, it came. So, again, I certainly don't need a pat on the back, but those guys definitely deserve it, so I'd appreciate it, because they don't get a whole lot of interaction with y'all, so feel free to give them a pat on the back or a shake of the hand.
You
And Shane,
you get the biggest pat, Shane. You started the ball rolling.
This was a project, I'll tell you, and like I said, and I appreciate that, Commissioner, because the way that it evolved, you know, versus, you know, we're dealing with these finance policies, and I think those are good things, but we still stuck with, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right. And, you know, as we evolved, we said, well, geez, you know what, now we're gonna have this new center and these old decrepit rec buildings, and then we did the rec center, and we said, you know what really makes sense is putting a band shell on there, and that all costs money, and you had the flexibility to do it, but it takes foresight too, and it's easy for us just to go ahead and get it done, but you guys have to answer to constituency and be responsible for the city coffers as well as we do. But that started, like I said, you know, a constant evolving project has an evolving budget, and before you know it, you just worry about where that bottom line is gonna come in, just like you would for your own house if you were building your own house. You start adding a dock and an extended kitchen and, you know, landscaping, you name it, you still gotta live within those confines of the dollar. So it happened, we're here, the building is nearly perfect. You won't see a whole lot of capital improvements to it, obviously. There are maintenance things that'll start being required right out of the gate. All of our mechanicals and those types of things, usually the warranties expire in a year, so we'll be probably building some money into budgets just in case something bad happens with a mechanical system. You know, you gotta have air conditioning in a rec center and stuff like that. So we'll, like this is the improper way to say it, but like buying the extended warranty at Best Buy. That's what we'll probably start budgeting for on a couple of those things that we just need immediate response for. So, again, long-winded way of saying kudos to staff, kudos to the board. That was a long, probably a 3-year process, and we're still all here to talk about it, so that's good.
And Mr. Crawford, it's fun. Anywhere I go in this county, everybody comments highly on this, that's been here. And matter of fact, like I said, got to hear it today on the radio when Mr. Diaz was down here with his family this past weekend at the car show. They walked around the center and said, wow.
Cool.
So kudos to you and staff.
Thank you.
Next, discussion on endorsement of implementation of a regional transit fare card for public transportation. Mr. City Manager, I imagine that's PSTA.
Well, yeah, and Mayor, you can probably comment this to more degree than I can. We both received this, and it was kind of just on my desk to say, hey, sign. And, you know, again, no matter what side of the fence you sit on, you know, now transportation has become not necessarily a 4-letter word in Madera Beach, but certainly a word that is taking some notice. And so I didn't want to just go ahead and sign it, although I think it's probably in a very generic way good for the community. What they're saying is, you know, whether or not you're driving the Jolly Trolley or taking, you know, the PSTA bus or whatever, they want to have a regional card, frankly, that you can charge off of. Then there was some commentary the other day that if we do ever, and we will, establish our own ferry service, that we could even have the card, you know, that they could buy money on that. And it started to get a little bit complicated and frankly a little bit confusing for me. And so I think right now at this point, they're asking for a very simple standard letter saying in a very generic fashion, yes, we approve of this. But I would ask that, you know, if it's going to affect us and let me go back. One of there's an additional route that's being proposed by PSTA that would take basically people from St. Pete's to Madera Beach. It's either Madera Beach, Treasure Island, or St. Pete Beach. And I don't think we're the favorite on that one, but we are certainly an option because we're one of the few cities that are members of PSTA that tax for it. And so that's why I had an impromptu meeting, and I was just invited. They hosted themselves here, but then they kind of just threw this letter at me, and so I wanted to know, you know, if the board, you know, approves of that, or at least get it out there so you're aware that it's happening. So, and Mayor, like I said, you probably know more about this thing than I do.
You're about the same as me.
All right, so I guess at this point, like
And
I said,
basically, well, we're doing the same thing. I know I'm introduced into the Barrier Island Council tomorrow, a resolution and endorsing the vision of waterborne taxi services. So I think it could be the same thing, couldn't it?
I think so. You know, that's just that, you know, Vince and I, we had to rebid the water taxi service because there was some confusion on the money end of it. I mean, Dave's got the mechanics of how a water taxi would work nailed down. Now we just have to get the bid in and get it going. But I would hate to, complicate the issue or delay the implementation of a water taxi because they want to come out and say, hey, wait a minute, we want to have a card that you use, and, let's keep apples and oranges
Yeah,
aside
exactly. I
for,
think
at least
that's
for
good, Mr.
now,
Crawford.
and in 10 years when this is a big whopping success and we're all dead and gone or whatever, they can discuss that then. But in the meantime, I think just a regional card that, like, you would get at any college or university, or frankly, a credit card that addresses all the public transportation things outside of our private ones in Madeira Beach, probably makes a lot of sense, and I'll be happy to send a letter. And I think they requested of the mayor and the city manager. So Mayor, if the board deems necessary, I can have 2 letters drafted somewhat differently with the same type of verbiage approving of it, if the board thinks it's a good idea.
Do we have consensus from the board to allow the city manager to draft a letter for?
Absolutely.
All right. And then, Mr. City Manager, I imagine you can send it to us individually or through the city attorney or city clerk. And get
Yeah,
it.
oh yeah, we'll copy you all on it, and we'll get it to the
Okay.
clerk, so if it can just be distributed. I don't think it needs to be a topic at the next meeting. I think this is a long vetted type project, so.
All right. Anything else on that?
No, sir. I'll get the
Okay,
letter, I'll get the letter
I
out
guess you got a
sometime.
presentation of the Pinellas County Board of Commissioners 2015 accomplishments report.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that was something that was sent to me. I don't know if it was sent to you, but
No, it was
I
to you.
copied it because it says city managers. And so, we all have contacts up at the county. I'm sure we all got county commissioners that we talked to, and my colleague, Mr. Woodard. But they sent out what I thought was a very comprehensive, I guess, success report of what they've been doing. And so if you didn't receive that, I just wanted to copy you on it so that, our friends up at the county are doing just as well as we are down here at the city level. But it's a relatively lengthy report too. I appreciate the clerk's office for being able to copy it. I tried doing it myself, and I still need to be tutored on how to use the copy machine the right way. But she was able to pull this off. And so if that's something, you're saying, hey, what is the county doing for us? It's a pretty good report. It was very well done on their part, so just wanted to share that with you for your edification. It doesn't require any motion, any action.
No. All righty. I guess next, renewal of contract with Alan Susky for lobbying services.
All right, so right after we tell you guys you need to live within the confines of your budget, this comes up. And what this is Alan Susky is an individual that we contracted with for lobbying services. I used him extensively, and when I say extensively, I'll take credit for some of it, but he is the one that did the major drive to secure that $350,000 that we received. Obviously, we've got friends of Madeira Beach, such as Representative Kathleen Peters and Senator Brandis, and of course that they assisted in that. But if we're going to stay in this game, frankly, and I've done this in Wisconsin, actually. I was a registered lobbyist in Wisconsin for a while. You need to have a guy like this, and they're not cheap. But they're not cheap because they secure you pretty major dollars. So what he's asking for is, I believe, $2,500. Yeah, here it is. I'm sorry, it's not part of your packet, but it was on the dais when he came in. $2,500 a month for 6 months, leading us up into the new budget. And the reason for that is, and Vince and I had a conversation, I don't know if Vince was in the room at that time, but I'm like, when they're in session, what are you doing, right? Why am I paying you if they're not up there voting? And he gave me a pretty good story on what they do outside of session, and that's, to be quite honest, where a lot of the work gets done. In regards to, planting the seed that, Madeira Beach really could use some help, or, this next time around, and you guys can certainly have some conversation about that if you want to on a future workshop. But everyone said, we did a good job on our beach coins, but they're still the ugliest things on earth if you go to the beach for a pretty day of, sitting back and relaxing. So we've got a number that we know we have to hit in terms of either replacing them or making them aesthetically pleasing. And if you, as a board, say, hey, wait a minute, there's better things we can do, that's fine, and we can take a look at that. But there are very certain, and I would call them, I don't want to call them rare, but a project has to fit a certain criteria to be able to get an appropriation like we did. So in regards to ours, this last time it was pedestrian and lighting and safety and those types of things. There's a lot of waterway money out there for such things as this, and to make them aesthetically pleasing, because right now ours are safe, but they're going to deteriorate. I mean, they're old. They're from I believe Commissioner Shantz or Vice Mayor Shantz just said the early 50s. And I mean, we just did some work on them, but there's other things out there that we can use. And so if I was looking at this as my own personal budget, like we just were talking about, $2,500 a month to lead us up into October, where I think it actually jumps, and he just sent me the text, I think it goes to $4K a month. But if you do that math, even on this one tiny appropriation, it was certainly a good return. And so it's an expensive venture, but he certainly at least proved his weight to me. But again, you know, we can't just contract with him when we need him. So we would go ahead and ask for a budget amendment and Vince and I haven't really had a chance to talk about this yet, but I doubt that he's got $2,500 a month laying around up until October to pay him. And then budget specifically for his services in October. And to be quite frank, you know, it would be maybe one of the first places I look if we're looking for places to cut. But when you look, it's a roll of the dice. I mentioned Vegas. Just because you sign this guy up doesn't mean that he's going to bring home a $500,000 appropriation every time, but I think he's probably going to try to prove his worth. Otherwise, he knows he's not going to get his contract next time. So we batted very well this last time with a $350,000 project. And again, if you just do the simple math, it's definitely worth it. I don't know Alan very well. He and I have another one of those email type relationships, but he's persistent and he's well known, and he's got a lot of contacts. I know that through the aides within the like the Brandis's office and Kathleen Peters' office. So he's not shy. And again, I've met him before, but I certainly don't know him very well. But I was impressed, and when he delivered that $350,000 appropriation, like I said, a lot of people will lay claim to that, you know, the credit for that. I worked my tail off, but so did he. But we also had friends of Madera Beach in terms of legislators that helped us out as well. So, you know, if you're, I don't want to get burned on another recommendation, but if you're asking for my professional recommendation, I would recommend it based solely on the numbers alone. I think it's a good business decision. I think we can probably come up with a project or two that we can submit that would bring some state dollars into Madera Beach that, frankly, we hadn't done a very good job of asking for state appropriations before. And I think you're all savvy enough and have worked with the state long enough to know that there's money out there. And this year, finally, we weren't on the veto list. So.
Well, Mr. City Manager, just knowing Mr. Susky's pass and, you know, the incoming for the commission, I don't know if you're aware who's the chair of the appropriations this year is Senator Ludvala, and I know that Mr. Susky and Mr. Ludvala are very close, and I know that I think a lot of that $350,000 had a lot to do with talking to Senator Ludvala. So when you have somebody on your team like that, it's not a bad bet moving in that direction. And I mean, we all know how Tallahassee works, and unfortunately, it's not what you've done, it's who you know.
Well, and I believe it was a $350,000 appropriation if you do the simple math, and I had to literally do it on a piece of paper because Vince wasn't here, but we netted $302,000 if you think that, you know, his costs were $48,000. So he said he would go to appropriations for us every year, and you know, the 1 year where we say, hey, wait a minute, we got nothing back, we can always reevaluate it. This is just a year-to-year contract, but I think it's definitely worth, you know, the commission's consideration, but then your staff's time. And I get a lot of credit for stuff I don't do. I mean, Vince was widely involved in that. So was Dave and some other departments, because they require information that the governor just doesn't hand out, you know, state appropriations like ice cream treats. You know, you've got to qualify. So between what we're doing with Alan on the state side and then applying for the grants through the Pinellas Planning Council, you know, I think your city staff is doing about all they can in regards to getting available dollars outside of the city coffers.
Well, you know, the staff needs to be commended because we have gotten a lot of grants just in the last few years I've been on the city commission. And you know, it goes back to a simple statement. I don't care where you're at or what you're doing. You got to spend money to make money. So I don't think there's a thing wrong with it. I think.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Mayor, this would require a budget amendment and then a contract award, frankly, for 6 months. And then what I would do is build this, if I can, into the city manager's budget. And then you, as a board, can evaluate whether or not you want it to stay for the 2016/17 session.
And I just note the major cities that I see get appropriations. sometimes it's a bad word, but it's just the way business gets done.
The one, if I can warn you, is if you're not sold on this idea and think, you know what, I'm gonna ask for it to be removed in the budget in October, I would not do this now. Because to pay him now and then in October not renew a contract with him would be somewhat counterproductive, because that's where we'll finally get the appropriation. So you have to be somewhat comfortable with the idea that I'll build it into the budget and it'll be a $40,000 expenditure for next calendar year. Otherwise, I think you're throwing away 6 months of money right now.
Well, you gotta have that person up there knocking on that door consistently after that money. I mean, we can go to our state representatives, but we're not in Tallahassee weekly to sit there and knock on.
That's really where it comes down to, Mayor.
It's repetitive.
It's that person-to-person contact, you know, Dave or Vince or I can send an email and, you know, it gets lost in some inbox in some legislator's office, but you really need to have that constant contact. That's how it was in Madison, Wisconsin. That's how it is here too. You know, so if we're gonna play the game, just like we always do, let's play it right. And Commissioner Vice Mayor Chauncey hit it right on the head. It costs a couple of bucks, but this year we can prove to our entire constituency that you netted $302,000. That's still not a bad, that's not a bad haul.
That was a good pony. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
See if we're gonna build it into the
$15,000
budget.
budget amendment, $15,000?
And then put it, and then work it into next year's, I mean, if you're considering.
Right now, we're gonna do a $15,000 budget amendment.
Correct. I mean, Vince, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that's probably what make the most sense on my end, if that's what, so it'd be,
Yeah, you would need to do a budget amendment in order to approve it.
and then there'll be I'll have an actual contract, and you'd have to award the contract the same night just at the next BOC meeting.
But that would be in next year's budget.
No. We're gonna do a contract for now to get us to next year's budget, and then we'll have another contract for then. So it's a
Contract for
6-month
6 months.
contract, basically.
Okay. And you said it was actually 48,000, because I thought you said it was $4,000 a month for 6 months, which is 24,000 plus the 6.
Well,
is only
this
30.
one's a little bit different. After what, I just got a text from him, what he's just giving us a break. Basically, he got us hooked. He's a businessman, and he got us. So he gave us a break. We were down to 2,500, but his normal rate is $4,000. So if you do 4 times 12, you get 48. And so we even netted more money than the 302. I was just using the rate, his normal rate. So we did even better than the 302,000 than I referenced. Is probably closer to 310 or 315. Because we've only been with him for, I think, just a little bit over a year, Vince. I don't know if you have that, if you remember that off the top of your head, but I think this is for our first full
I think we just
contract.
finished the second 6-month term with him.
Second 6 months, yeah. So this is only our first year with him, so.
Can you tell me if he represents any other municipalities locally?
I can have that for you at the next meeting. He's got a resume.
Yeah, I'm okay with doing the $15,000 budget amendment and looking into it for next year's budget.
Does everybody feel that way? Okay. Mr. City Manager, would you get that information that Commissioner List requests?
We will make it
Move
happen.
forward. All right, next discussion on possible early updates to BOC policy handbook. Madam City Clerk.
Basically, we just updated the changes that you had made throughout the year. They were very simple. One of them was to create a new business item, contracts and agreements, to break out more complex contracts rather than have them just under a consent agenda. And the other thing was to put presentations and establish a formal procedure for requesting them. And all of those changes are outlined in red in your packet on pages 12, 13, and 14. So if there's anything else that you want we just, basically, these were changes that you made during the year. We just had never incorporated them into the policy book. Anybody else have any changes they want or need? And we're good to go.
It looks good to me.
You're good, Madam City Clerk.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, next, discussion on water filling station at Archibald Park. Actually, I attended a meeting with a group called the Surf Riders. They're an environmental group. I'm sure some of y'all might have remembered them in the paper about bringing up the straw stuff up in, over in Treasure Island area. They had a fantastic presentation, and it was on bottled, empty water bottles. And I don't think we have a straw issue on Madeira Beach, because I don't think we have restaurants selling straws or anything like that. I know I've been on the beach enough to where I don't see a lot of straws on it, but I do see a lot of water bottles. And I know we have bins out there, we do a great job picking it up. But to start thinking a little greener here in Madeira Beach, sometimes you gotta take a step, and I've already had this conversation with the city manager. We have them here in our city hall, the bottled water stations to fill them up. And just wondering if the commission would consider maybe letting the city manager look in, but it would take to put a bottle filling station up at Archibald Park. You can keep track of the bottles we're saving. You know, kind of clean up our beaches a little bit, not having the overflow of the plastic bottles in the recycle bin. And just doing something a little green out there.
Mr. Mayor, just so I met with Frank DeSantis isn't here today, but we did get a cost on one of those things. And if you're thinking of doing something similar to what was
that's
implemented
exactly.
here at City Hall, you're probably looking at about a $1,500 piece of equipment plus install. There is trying to be nice, there's a water fountain, or we call them bubblers up north, that is there that I don't think any of us would really enjoy using. So the utility is there. And when I say not using it, they keep it clean, but it's old, it's antiquated, and it's not filtered. You put in a unit like this, you're gonna change everything. I don't think the Snack Shack people are gonna go out of business because you're putting in a water fillable station. In fact, I think it's a really cool idea. When these got put in, they got utilized immediately. And so,
I mean, we'd be the first beaches on it. It's something that's being put, not around, around the entire state of Florida. We'd be one of the first beaches. I think Archibald Park would be a fantastic location. You can actually, like say, if you've looked at them, they've got counters on them. We can actually track how many bottles of water we're saving from being out there. And if it works, maybe look at going to South Beach next with it, or, Johns Pass Park with it next.
yeah, I think it's very doable. Vince, I know, just exited the room again, but we did look, we had some money on Archibald, or in the Archibald budget for doing like constant beach monitoring, very similar to what they do in Cocoa Beach or on the West Coast. And that's just becoming more and more of a difficult type thing to do. First of all, we got the Bay News 9 camera down in Johns Pass Park. And then secondly, the positioning of this camera and the type of camera that we need and the amount of bandwidth it would take up on our website, which is already stressed. So I was gonna kind of just scratch that idea, which doesn't even require your approval because it's a lower dollar amount type project, and then just use dollars from that. So you don't need a budget amendment. We're just gonna flip flop a couple of ideas and put it in. So it would be installed in, and I think, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, and we'll have to do a little analysis, but where that water fountain now is kind of like where the steps come down, right? On the back end of the bathrooms.
Yeah, it's on the other side.
Yeah, so we definitely, want to sign it so people understand that it's there. You'd have to have wayward signs. There's always some sort of hiccup with the plumbing at Archibald Park. Dave just went through a 3-month drama with that. So I don't want to say that it's going to be a $2,000 thing, but we can definitely keep it within my authority, and I can report back as to exactly how much it costs, so you guys know if you want to insert 2 or 3 more into the budget. But those types of things are becoming popular. Dave's rolling his eyes at me, and Frank too, because there's benches out there now that they're electrical. You can plug in your iPhone or plug in your iPad, and people don't have GPS in their cars anymore because they got it on their phone. So people have to sit down and charge their phone for a little bit. I think you're going to start seeing these types of things in the next 5 to 10 years, but this is a no-brainer. There's so many people out there that are going out there and getting hot and sweating it out, and maybe having an extra beer or two, and they need to get some water in them. So.
Explain to me what it is. I mean, do they buy it?
Yeah,
The water?
no, Pat, it's, see the water bottles that y'all got?
Yeah,
So when this water bottle is empty, when it's empty, you put it up to a sensor and it fills it up with filtered water. And then you save, one of these from the landfill. But it gives it to you immediately and it's filtered. So if you see, there's a water fountain right behind Dave, on that balcony over there, and it's the water fountains that we have here in City Hall. The lower level one, it'll just say, hold your bottle here, and a little sensor picks up on it and fills it up perfectly. Yeah.
okay. I just wondered if there was any charge.
No charge.
No charge.
But it's
How do
filtered.
how do we filter the water we're gonna make pure from to drink out of the bottle? Is it just gonna be regular water?
No, it's like changing the filter in your refrigerator at home.
Oh, okay.
If you've got water that comes out of your door every, 6 months, you have to change that filter. Same thing here. Dave's guys
Sorry,
are.
I'm so stupid.
No, Pat, it's.
But
trust
I
me,
never heard of one of those things.
I was all
That's pretty neat.
educated on it too.
I didn't know they existed until we went through the project here. They're pretty neat. So I saw Kenny, one of the guys that works for Dave, changed out the filter the other day. The one thing that I did notice is that when you change out the filter, the counter resets. So it'd be interesting to know if you can not reset that counter. So you know, because you're gonna look back and say, oh, wait a minute, we only filled 2,000
And that's
bottles.
the idea, seeing what it does. but
Yeah, gauging
from-
it.
I mean, but I've noticed the machines around here, when I refill my bottled water, when I'm sitting here, it shows you what you're saving. I mean,
It's-
the number you've saved in less than a year
Oh,
is outstanding here in City Hall.
Right. Well, and
And
you're,
being one of the first beach communities to do this, I think, you know, an
you're
exciting
providing
thing
a
to-
service, and from a public health and safety standpoint, you know, you need to have, you got a lot of people out there, you need to have a water station, so it makes a lot of sense. I'd like to try to put it in a more visible location. I don't know, I'll have to work with Dave and see if we can find a better spot for where, other than where the current one is, but we'll do our best. But, yeah, we'll put one out there and use it as a pilot program and see if it catches on.
What about over at Doug's area in the rec department? Seems to me people drink
I
a lot of water.
believe you have one. Yeah, one. So we've got one in the
You
rec
have
center,
one?
we've got one out here by the locker rooms and right by the
there.
fitness center,
There's
and
one
then
right
one in
there.
the lobby of the, city hall, and I would imagine, I'm sure we have some sort of filtered water service in the fire station. It's been so long since I've been in there. I don't think they have water fountains, but I think they have filtered water through their, they've got some nice refrigerator chests. I'm sure that's where they get theirs from.
How about the marina, Dave? You got one into marina?
So people have to be aware, though, that they have to bring their empty bottle to fill it up.
You gotta have your water bottle.
You have to have an empty water bottle before it's any good for you.
Yep.
So can we put some of these Madeira Beach bottles out for like a pilot program? Put 150 of these out empty to when we start? You know, so that they're like a display on the side there and say, pick up your water bottle, fill it up, bring it back.
Yeah, I think the idea would be to eliminate another.
The idea is to bring a
bottles.
container that you reuse.
You bring your
container,
typical water
plastic,
bottle, you
yeah.
know, all the, you know, the hip kids, you know, they've got their backpack on and their water bottle. That's, I mean, my dad's in town because he had to babysit the dog. He carries a water bottle wherever he goes for filtered water purposes. So I think it's just a trend that's, you know, kicking on, but if we needed to do
So we're
something
trying
like
to
that.
get rid of these.
You want to get rid of those or at least get them reused.
Okay.
Y'all like it?
The fire
like
chief
it.
just texted me. He says they have one at the fire department as well, so he must be watching, remotely, so.
So waiting right there, Madeira Beach will be the first on that one, buddy.
There you go.
Sorry. All right, I think that's it. The only thing I'd like to bring up, and it wasn't on the agenda, I hope everybody heard that, everybody knows the 2017 National Championship is being played in Tampa, right? The Tourist Development Council, last week at our meeting, we decided to go ahead and let the Sports Commission to start trying to get some things over here in Pinellas County. I'm sure Clearwater's going to go after the Beach Band Day with the football players. But the discussion was thrown at me, and I hope you all would just kind of nod. They want to come talk to myself and the city manager about maybe us hosting the 5K run for the 2017 National Championship. So I guess the city manager could come back with everything on that, and I'm sure, but that's kind of exciting, guys. I mean, to be a part of the national championship, that's a star. That's a star out here in Madeira Beach. So
Absolutely.
that's exciting news.
Well, Mr. Minton, I don't want to make this any longer. Vince just walked into the room, but yeah, I'd like to have that meeting. I'd like to involve him just because of his, you know, private hobby and being a runner and knowing how those things work. Secondly, we haven't had a meeting yet with the St. Petersburg Bowl people, and Doug and I have met privately on a number of occasions to discuss the merits of that one. And although we do I think it's definitely worth the exposure, it's definitely worth the marketing value that we get. But it seems like every year, like this year, and it was embarrassing for me, and I had to get involved as well. I've got my mayor in the bathroom filling up water balloons. I get called and have to go get a public works truck to unbury the DJ because he didn't know that sand sinks like snow does in Wisconsin. I mean, it's highly, it's a real burden for the employees, and that's not how it starts out. So we agree to it based off of, okay, this is gonna be no big deal, and then we have to throw a bunch of resources at it. So we may wanna take a look at a transition, or Doug and I definitely have to nail down with the St. Petersburg Bowl people, who are great folks. It's just, you know, a lot of work is done by a committee. Our main contact is a great guy, but he can't control everything that's going on because it's such a huge thing. And so let's have that meeting, but we may want to decide, hey, let's just do one or the other, and go from there.
And looking at this one, Mr. City Manager, you know, this will be working as we've been working with the CVB and Kevin Smith's crew over there, where I think we've had great working relationships with everything coming through. So we're working with a little bit more solid infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Then, yeah, I mean, I didn't mind filling up water bottles. I mean, it was a fun day. And
Water
you know,
balloons,
we
they were
just-
balloons.
Yeah,
I don't know who
yeah,
you were
whatever,
throwing them
yeah.
at, but You know, and like I said, you know, not saying that the mayor wouldn't want to participate or the city manager shouldn't be out there on the beach, you know, pulling out a truck or whatever, but it's like, you know, every year, it's just, it's never as it is initially presented, and so Doug and I would like to nail that.
And I know,
that
I mean,
down.
I watched, what, you know, just Mr. Andrews did personally. I mean, he was out there doing cones, from blocking off traffic to, you know, picking up cones to pulling stuck trucks out of the sand, you know.
When we get, I mean, Doug, how many buses did we park at South Beach? Was it 12? I mean, Pat Krager's got that down to a science, so it'd be a shame to like give up on it now because we're kind of good at it. But, you know, to ask a lot of employees and people of Madera Beach to come out on Christmas Eve to do that and then obligate yourself to the game the day after Christmas Day, it's, you know, it's poor timing on the calendar, and like I said, all of us don't mind
Well, it's
working,
exciting, we
but-
can pick and choose the events we want to do, so that's
Well,
really the nice thing.
you want to
where you're
provide
getting at.
something that the people of Madera Beach want to come out and do and
Yeah.
hang out on, and I don't know if that, on Christmas Eve, that's the first thing that, you know, me and my family would, you know, want to pick out, so. Mr. Mayor, if you're handing off the reins, I just leaned over by Tom and Amy. I don't want to call you on the spot because I know you hate the camera, but under item 6, if you guys can all go back to that, it's on page 13 and 14 of the change of rules. And Amy, I could be completely off base and tell me if I'm crazy. But under contracts and agreements, and the reason why we pulled this out, and if you read your summary report, which I appreciate the clerk's office doing in my absence, is because I've separated that out from the consent agenda so that you understand the contracts that we're entering into, and so I can kind of give you a short narrative. I know I get long-winded at times, but you need to, those are the ones I don't like getting swept under the rug, and I know you're not sweeping them under the rug, but the perception was there. So on that, number 6, Amy, this section is provided to allow for more careful consideration of complex contracts and agreements that require individual approval. And frankly, those are contracts over $15,000, anything that I can't enter into myself. Citizens' input may be heard once a motion is made by the commission. And Amy, this is the part that I need your help on. On items of unfinished business should be deleted, I believe, right? Because unfinished business is the section before. Am I
Yes.
incorrect? All right,
Yes.
and I'm sorry, I don't mean to call you
No,
out
no,
on
no.
the spot.
That's fine.
So, commissioners, just as long as you're aware that the next time you see that, we're gonna have to make that adjustment on that line. Very, very simple line, but I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something, so. That's all I got.
That's
Mr.
it, all right.
I wanted, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to
Yes,
say
ma'am, Vice
something
Mayor.
about our newsletter. I think it would be kind of nifty, since we have all these people that are really coming to and they're interested in what's going on in their city. I think it would be nice if we had in the newsletter a few things that people really don't realize around town. How many children Doug has in his summer camp? How many ball teams came here to play? How much money did we receive from these teams that came into Madera Beach to play? You know, how many people do we have visit on our beaches? You can make an estimate, just like TDC does. There's so many things, little things that people need to know. You know, did you ever talk to anybody? They don't have any idea about the ball teams. What are they doing out there? Who are they? I mean, that kind of stuff, I think, is wonderful. These are the things that the administration has worked on and got put together for this city. And they see all these ball teams and all they want to do is complain. They make so much noise, they do this, they do that. How these exercise people are out here on the porch on Saturday morning. That's another one, Doug. They want to know what they're doing. What are they doing out there at 7 o'clock in the morning? You know, these kinds of things are important to people that don't really know what's going on like we do.
I think you're right. In fact, I had a conversation, I was playing kickball the other night with one of Doug's staff, and he asked, you know, basically, should we have a did you know type section? And it can be like the fun facts of Madera Beach. But, you know, it was funny, I knew I was on campus the night that they were doing the boot camp, and I knew I was gonna get a phone call from Steve Kochek because he didn't know what was going on over there. And when I told him what was up, he understood. We took a lot of criticism for that carnival, saying that we spent too much money on it. And in reality, Doug, what are we gonna net? $15,000 to $19,000-ish. So not only did we provide a service to the community that, you know, was at least once provided somewhere else, but, you know, because of the hard work, we put $15,000 into the city coffers. And so, again, I don't want to pat me or the staff on the back too much, but when you guys first hired me, well, and some of you weren't the group that hired me, it was told to me literally, if you don't do anything else, bring some events to Madera Beach. Well, now we're doing all this stuff, and, you know, it's like, well, was that a good use of our money? Somehow we have to get that information back to you. So, you know, you see it in Vince's financial reports, but very generically and non-specifically maybe, and so maybe there's, maybe it can be very simple, like you said, did you know that carnival brought $15,000 back to your community, and not only did it do that, your community benefited by having the carnival right here in their backyard. And now some people might say, that wasn't a benefit having it in my backyard, but that elderly gentleman that said having a Ferris wheel outside of my front door was the coolest thing ever would say differently. So we're never gonna make everybody happy with these events, and especially since we're slapped in the middle of a neighborhood, but we can definitely do that. But yeah, I tend to agree with you on our newsletter, you know, and no detriment to the mayor, and you can have all the ad space you want, but if you read my report, it's pretty gosh darn repetitive. You know, it's my boring job is, you know, the same type of stuff, and it's the same because it takes 6 to 12 to 18 months to get some of this stuff done. Doug, on the other hand, I would be happy to give him my page every other time or whatever and say, hey, did you know that we've, you know, tripled our childcare, you know, enrollment or whatever it may be, or, you know, the concert that's coming up. You know, that's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear from me. You know, they of course want to hear from the mayor and his spiel, but.
Good plain English, right? Just straight right out, one-liners. They'll read them.
Well, Madam Vice Mayor and Mr. City Manager and Mr. Andrews, I mean, and it keeps coming back to me, well, what did the city pay to do this event? But I said, the city made money. We're supplying this land.
Service.
And
we're getting paid
we're getting paid. If the event's successful or not successful, we got our pay. And I mean, we want to promote things and make sure things are successful that you're letting come in, because, Mr. Andrews, I think the things that you go after is what we want to see.
Well, and
So-
Doug doesn't only go after anything, he goes after things that'll bring a return. Doug
Exactly.
is a numbers and cents
Yeah.
guy, about as close to Vince as you can possibly get, and he likes his revenue lines bigger than his expense lines, and that's why I hired him. He's got corporate experience. You know, a lot of times you get used to the public sector where, I don't want to say it's an open checkbook, but there's always money there. The corporate guys got to go fight for their money to make sure that they get the same budget or more next year, and so we're all doing a good job of that. You know, again, look at the marina. You know, everything's kind of evolved a little bit, so again, we're getting into a back padding session.
Yeah, we got a
but-
lot of sections in town we could save. Did you know?
Yeah, you know.
This time it'd be about the marina, one time it'll be about the rec department.
Well, you know, something as simple as, you know, I was thinking
Parks
about Dave's organization. You know, when I first got here, you know, you could buy frozen shrimp in the refrigerator, but now they've developed this aquarium that it's crazy looking, but we have live shrimp there. You know, that's something we didn't have 3 years ago. Did you know you can buy live shrimp at the marina, you know? Those types of just simple but goofy facts that people just don't know, or things that, you know, we've been addressing but haven't addressed in 15 years. So we'll make that a department head thing. Cheryl, if you're watching, put that on the next department head agenda, or Doug, bring it up, and Dave as well. But we'll start doing those types of things. We can do that with the fire department as well, so. But that initial 60 was up at least 1/3 from the year prior too. You know, now that we have the facility, you know, people got interested. It's, you know, so it continues to grow. I think we're pretty much capacity on almost anything that we do. I mean, we've got fitness instructors fighting over room, not fighting, but jockeying, you know, for, you know, to have space over somebody else, and, you know, softball teams that are on waiting lists, and we even have to trim that down because we found different sports that people like to enjoy better. I saw people playing pickleball. I saw what pickleball was for the first time the other night. You know, all the kickball leagues, the soccer leagues, you know, there's talk about doing, you know, like a flag football league. So we're going to continue to evolve, but those are all things that people just don't, you're right, Madam Vice Mayor, if you don't ask, you don't know, and if we don't provide it, you know, some people are kind of shy in asking. So I'll talk to Amy Verdinsky and see if we can kind of alternate that newsletter. You know, and no offense to, you know, what I'm doing or what the board is doing, but I read that article, and there's a lot of the last newsletter, there's a lot of advertising in it, and if you don't put any funny or comical or did you know type content in it, it's boring. It's just flat out boring reading. So maybe we'll spend a little time with the publisher too and see if we can't jazz that up a little bit.
There is Krabby's Corner, though.
Krabby's Corner, yeah, and don't, we can't do away with that one.
We did
because
say
that's a town favorite, but the city manager, maybe I can do it one every or every other quarter or something like that, but we'll figure it out.
How many high school parties have you had over at the rec hall recently?
With their parents there or not? Just get the speech up back there.
Doug, can I invite you up to the podium so everybody can hear the statistics?
And Pat, you might want to turn on your microphone so everybody could hear the question.
Gosh, we're just packed. Whether it's a high school party, whether it's last weekend, what you probably saw out there was a kids' party that they all started going down to the splash pad and they had rented out a room in the rec. But as far as like weddings and anniversary parties and everything else, I mean, we're getting to the point where we've booked this room and the rooms over at the rec just about every weekend. I mean, we're kind of, these next couple of months, we've got to move our staff around so much because we have to have a staff member there during these things, so.
I'm glad we're
crazy, but
talking about
great.
this and not to step on top of you, but for instance, is the wedding this week Thursday or Saturday? Saturday?
Yeah, we have a wedding on Saturday during King of the
So on
Beach.
Thursday, we did the same thing with the King of the Beach. We're having a plan commission meeting, which is going to prove to be hectic, and parking is going to be at a loss, I guess. If people are coming to the meeting, let them know, City Hall parking lot, the library parking lot, and Winn-Dixie. So there will be plenty of parking. But on Saturday, we had overbooked it, knowing that we had the King of the Beach, and I talked to the bride, who I thought would be the one that I needed to talk to, and she says, "Oh my God, this is perfect. We were going to the tournament right after the wedding anyway," you know. So, it's really turning into that type of thing. But we kept always saying, you know, and we heard it from outside consultation: if you build it, they will come. Just trust us. And they were right. In fact, we could. Not saying that we're going to, but we could certainly use even additional space, but we're gonna live within the confines of what we got, so.
I know you're having a lot, because I've had a lot of people ask me about prom parties and stuff. Their grandparents are friends of mine. And I say, well, if you're gonna go have a party there, you better get your name in early.
We're actually, we've got events even booked into, 2017, 2018. That's how far people are booking in advance now, so. It keeps us busy. I mean, we do a lot of tours of the facility, and it wasn't really I didn't really think of that as a revenue line item as big as it's going to end up being someday, but, it's a good problem to have.
Oh, yeah.
And remember this conversation come budget time, because as they're doing more, the revenues lines will go up, but that means that we have to staff those things, and we don't just hand off the keys, we have to keep these facilities pristine, otherwise people are gonna say in 3 years, we're not interested, and so we have a cleaning fee, we have a supervision fee, we don't just open the doors and say we'll be back at 10 o'clock to lock them up, so. As these types of things have increased at Doug's place and at the marina, and as we add more programming everywhere, as long as the revenue lines go up, then we can entertain additional staff. Otherwise, we got to kind of live within the confines of where we're at. So,
And Madam Vice Mayor, I'm glad you brought that up. I own a home now. I live right across the street from the ball fields. Doug, every night. I mean, if it's young girls softball, Little League. But here's the fantastic thing, not only the kids on the field, but the people attending, watching this. It's packed down there. There's kids playing on basketball courts. I mean, something is happening there every night. And y'all are doing an outstanding job. You're keeping the fields pristine. I know it's got to be a lot of work with the people up and down on them. I saw the event the past week. You had people parked out on the main event field.
Yeah.
I know you got King of the Beach. You got things out there. But y'all are doing a great job keeping everything nice. And it is exciting seeing all these people here in Madeira Beach.
Thank you.
And you ought to hear the excitement from the children. Very
Yeah.
interesting. They're happy. It's a wonderful thing to hear.
That was
They are.
outstanding to
They're
bring
very
that up,
happy.
Madam Vice Mayor. Thank you very much.
it's getting long-winded. This is the last thing I'll say. Just so you guys understand how I maintain those fields out there, Doug and I have a gentleman's agreement. We can park anything on Field 3. That's the one closest to the rec center, but we don't park any vehicles, semi-trailers, anything like that on Field 1 or 2. So that means that in an event like this one that you're going to see this weekend, he knows that he only has one field to go back to and have to maintain, and that costs money. And so it's comical, but it's a business issue all the same. But with his staff, there's no way to say, okay, Doug, we chewed up, and let's face it, it rains almost every tournament that we have. We chewed up 3 fields, and we have kickball and softball and Little League this week. You gotta get out there and get that taken care of. It's just, it's impossible. So the event field is indeed just that, and then the Little League field and the center field are left alone. They can put up a tent if they need a cooling off tent or a first aid tent or something like that, but that's about it. So that's just the internal policy on that, and we haven't even drafted a administrative procedure yet. But, you know, again, if you're worried about, you know, why are we having these tournaments and we're gonna chew up these brand-new ball diamonds, that's just, we've done what we needed to do internally to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Anyway, sorry to ask you so many questions.
No problem.
Just interested, because I'm right across, you know, and I get all the good music and, you know, these young kids, they really get with it. And their music, and their parents will be there. They're just having a wonderful time.
Thank you, thank you.
I had one this week. There was, parents was there, and the kids was there, and everybody was having a great time.
Excellent.
And that's what we want. We want people to really enjoy it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys, appreciate it.
Gentlemen, seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 4:02 PM.